Finally, a story about a party, one with cat costumes and big money. You guessed it, we're talking about the Met Gala. It's an annual fundraiser. Well, I'll be more specific. It's an invite-only benefit, a black tie extravaganza, a celebrity-powered cocktail, and it raises big bucks. To give you an idea, last year the Met Gala raised more than $17 million. Who helps raise this money? A long list of star-studded invitees, which includes Indian celebs too. They're invited to pay and to attend. How much? $50,000 for each ticket. And what do they do at the party? Well, this year they dressed up like cats. But beyond that, do they actually help the cause they intend to support? Here's a report.
Fashion's biggest night out is here. Yes, we're talking about the Met Gala. It's held annually in New York City. Officially, it's the Metropolitan Museum of Art Costume Institute benefit. Heavy name, right? So it makes sense that everyone just calls it the Met Gala. Simple and sweet. Also, high fashion. And unofficially, it's considered the party of the year, with its studded guest list and extravagant outfits. Well, that's one way to talk about the clothes people wear to this event. Every year, the gala is built around a theme. And this year, it was all about Karl Lagerfeld, the late German fashion designer, known for shaping the modern fashion world. So people showed up in black and white outfits, adorned in pearls. They flexed their creative muscle. One attendee looked like she was up for a game of badminton. Another defied gravity. Overall, these outfits found a fan in the audience. But some were so over the top, they crossed over to the land of bizarre. Because we expected an homage to Lagerfeld, but not so many tributes to his beloved pet cat. Yes, attendees came in cat costumes and prosthetics. And we're talking fur, claws, and everything in between. But it works, because it seems like the world is gaga over the gala, and that helps the Met. To give you a clue, this gala has a nickname. It's called an ATM for the Met, because it raises money for the museum's fashion wing. Last year, the event raised $17.4 million. Because this is no everyday charity gala. Though it started with that intention, now it seems like its mission has shifted. It's become a showcase of the rich and famous, who can show off their opulence without feeling cringy about it. It's a spectacle of big brands supporting other big brands, and is drunk on a cocktail of celebrity power. Its attendees include famous names from the world of fashion, tech, politics, sports, and even social media. This year, the gala hosted 400 guests, including Rihanna, Cardi B, Serena Williams, Roger Federer, and Indian celebs like Alia Bhatt and Priyanka Chopra. How is this list decided? Who makes the cut? For starters, it's invitation only. And once invited, you must pay up. $50,000 for one ticket. Prices for tables begin at a whopping $300,000. Yes, that's a lot of money, but celebrities across the world don't mind shedding the cash, because going to the Met Gala meets the mark fashion-wise. Question is the Met itself missing the mark? The gala's purpose revolves around saving fashion. So far, it's raised over $200 million. And this money goes into a collection of over 33,000 pieces of fashion. That includes clothing, jewelry, and accessories. It documents fashion from the 1400s to now. And that sounds important, but it's not just the Costume Institute that's gaining from this. It's also the gala organizer, Vogue. In 2022, it sold live stream spaces for over $2 million, and the red carpet generates media value too. Last year, it was $543 million. So the intention is wonderful, but don't you think this money is doing much more than just saving fashion?
Joe Biden hosted an Eid party on Monday. It was a big deal for Muslim Americans. Donald Trump had cancelled these parties when he was the president. Biden has revived them. It's part of his so-called inclusive branding. Just how inclusive? Let me tell you. One member on Biden's guest list never made it to the party. The Secret Service called him and said, "Don't come." It wasn't just any member, though. It was the Muslim mayor of a city in New Jersey. Sounds fishy? Wait till you hear the details. Mohammad Khairullah is the longest-serving Muslim mayor in New Jersey. His first term began in the year 2001. Just before he was scheduled to reach the White House, the Secret Service called him. They said his security had not been cleared. Why? The Secret Service did not say. In fact, they still haven't. So Mohammad Khairullah returned home to New Jersey. Let me quote what he said later. "It left me baffled, shocked, and disappointed. It's not a matter of not going to a party, it's why I did not go. And it's a list that has targeted me because of my identity." What list is he talking about? The FBI has something called the Terror Screening Data Set. It has thousands of names, mostly Muslim. Reports say Mohammad Khairullah is on it, on that list, or at least someone with his name and date of birth is on that list. So the assumption is that's what blocked the mayor's entry. In simple words, religious profiling. This is a man who's been living in America for 32 years, 14 of which he spent as a volunteer firefighter. In 2001, he was elected as mayor of his city. He's even got a movie about himself. It's called Mayor Mohammed. It traces his battle against Islamophobia in the US. And how does the US government thank him for his services? By blocking him from the White House. And this has happened before. The same mayor was stopped at a New York airport in 2019. He was grilled for 3 hours. The questions included, "Do you know any terrorist?" He was also stopped at the US-Canada border, that too while traveling with his family. So it's not a one-off incident. It's something that's been happening repeatedly. And don't forget, Mohammad Khairullah is a mayor. If he can be harassed like this, what chance do ordinary Muslim Americans have? So much for America being the land of the free. Can you imagine the outrage if this had happened somewhere else? The lecturing would have been non-stop. But this time, the White House is silent. No comment on why an American mayor was religiously profiled. Perhaps they can include it in their annual Religious Freedoms Report. Yes, it's that time of the year. The U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedoms published its report on Monday. Quick side note, this is not a U.S. government authority. It's an independent federal agency that advises the State Department. What does this year's report say? Well, more of the same. They once again want India to be blacklisted by the White House. That's the 4th time since 2020. Talk about an unhealthy obsession. Now, there's no way the US government will implement this suggestion, but these reports do tell a story. Every country in the world gets a chapter in it, every country except the United States. This year's report accuses India of targeting the Muslim minority. But where is the mention of America's rising Islamophobia? Hate crimes against Muslims are up by 9%. Muslim mayors are getting profiled by the Secret Service. Yet the US believes it can lecture the rest of the world. Honestly, we're tired of this hypocrisy, of these unsolicited reports and advice. Joe Biden can host as many Eid parties as he wants to. He can sweet-talk Muslims, but none of it changes his country's record. A recent poll found that 62% American Muslims felt religion-based hostility. 65% felt disrespected because of their religion. Why not include that in the Religious Freedoms Report? It's very easy to sit on a perch and criticize. It's much harder to acknowledge problems and tackle them. Just ask the White House. They still won't say why a Muslim mayor was blocked from their Eid party. So that's the news from the front line. More attacks, more deaths. But diplomatically, where are things at? President Zelensky's charm offensive has worked in the West. Europe and North America are firmly behind him. But here in India, there are few takers. You know the reason for that. Russia is a long-standing partner of New Delhi, so picking sides is out of the question. Having said that, Ukraine's actions have not helped their cause. Let me tell you what happened on Sunday. Ukraine's defense ministry posted this picture on social media. It's a cartoon of the Hindu goddess Kali. It shows the goddess in Marilyn Monroe's famous pose. You can guess what happened next. Indian users on social media were outraged. They called it demeaning, insulting and Hindu-phobic. All true. But in a pure political sense, do you know what it was? Unnecessary. 5 minutes of research would have prevented this controversy. In fact, forget research. Common sense would have prevented it. The Ukrainian government is now in damage control. Their deputy foreign minister issued a clarification, and this is what she said. I'm quoting. "We regret the Ukrainian Defense Ministry's tweet depicting Hindu goddess Kali in a distorted manner. Ukraine and its people respect the unique Indian culture and highly appreciate India's support." Too little, too late. And I'm not talking about this cartoon fiasco. I'm talking about Ukraine's overall India policy. For 3 decades, it was on autopilot. Kiev never bothered to cultivate good ties with India. But once Russia invaded, realization dawned. Ukraine needed India's support to isolate Russia. But that's not how geopolitics works. Bilateral relations require years of focus and investment. Kiev did neither. Think back to 1998, when India tested nuclear weapons in Pokhran, Ukraine criticized it. Just to be clear, Ukraine was not the only one. The US was New Delhi's biggest critic back then. Yet look at where India-US relations are today. Miles ahead of India-Ukraine relations. That's the investment and focus I was talking about. Same with their support to Pakistan. Ukraine has been selling weapons to Islamabad for 3 decades. Total shipments, more than $1.6 billion. Reports say Pakistan is repaying the favor. There are reports of rockets, tanks and ammunition being sent to Ukraine. Unconfirmed, but important reports. Would this defense partnership have unsettled India? Yes, but again, Ukraine wasn't alone. Pakistan's arsenal is filled with Western weapons. So I come back to my first assessment. What Ukraine did to India, the West has also done. Criticized the nuclear tests, criticized the Kashmir policy, and sold weapons to Pakistan. Yet India has excellent relations with the West. What does that tell you? That Western countries made efforts to reshape their ties with India, Ukraine never did. They could never offer India anything strategic. Neither powerful weapons, nor political support on Kashmir, nor an expanding people-to-people exchange. And guess who did? Russia did. They criticized the nuclear tests in 1998 too, but they never joined the sanctions. In 2019, when Kashmir's statehood was revoked, Russia did not meddle. They called it India's internal matter. The fact is, Ukraine's past is haunting its relations with India in the present. I'll give an example of it. Last month, Kiev sent its deputy foreign minister to India, the same minister who apologized for the cartoon. She got 2 books from India's Minister of State for External Affairs. Guess what they were about? The history of Kashmir. Coincidence? Well, there's no such thing in diplomacy. Which brings us to the present day. Would things have been different if Ukraine had invested more in this relationship? If they'd stayed clear of Pakistan, or if they'd backed India on Kashmir? We can't say for sure, but Zelensky may have had more of New Delhi's attention. Maybe through more aid, or through peace negotiations, or maybe through the current G20 presidency. Remember, Ukraine is not part of the G20, but Kiev wants New Delhi to invite Zelensky to address virtually. So far, the government of India has been non-committal. In conclusion, let me say this. India's position on the war is less about Ukraine and more about Russia, and there is no disputing that. But that doesn't give Kiev a free pass. Their actions, or the lack of it, have not helped their cause. This offensive cartoon is the latest example. It reflects a lack of understanding about Indian sentiments and feelings. And this is the result of years of policy neglect. Email exchanges from inside the BBC, they talk about the risk of violating Indian laws. It's easier to rake up the freedom of speech debate, but does it give anyone a free pass to knowingly violate the law? America supports India because it needs India's support in return. And India is working with the US because it suits India's interests. This is how geopolitics works. Last night, he diffused a crisis with his defense minister. But today, Netanyahu was confronted with a new problem. His cabinet seems to have rebelled against him. UK is looking at the Indian subcontinent to fill its coffers. That India seems to be negotiating from a position of power, like a partner and not a former colony.
And there they go. It looks like
US and Russia are dangerously close to an armed conflict. This year, 2023, New Delhi will be the capital of global diplomacy. For a country as diverse as ours, with 88% of the population illiterate, it was a very big deal to write a constitution, and that too, the world's largest. Meanwhile, if we may, here's a Republic Day gift from India for the BBC. A list of suggestions for the BBC for their upcoming documentaries. Number 1, the Kohinoor and the colonial loot. Number 2, an outdated monarchy and unhealthy obsession with the royals. Number 3, racism in 2023. We're waiting.